try to stand this up. Take one. Okay. Ready? Okay, we got see? Okay. Check over there first. You got it? Yeah. Yeah, it looks good. I'm a little worried about the light, but I measured it. Oh yeah, we'll be fine. So apparently I forgot to wash this before I brought it into the shop. I really wish I would have washed it. So now I'm going to have to clean it and be careful that I don't contaminate all the bare metal. But anyways, I wanted to get underneath here so I can clean up the backside of some of the patches. These are the patches I put in the floor. This is that one patch I did on the wheel well floor. And you can see the new metal I put in on the sides. So I want to clean up all these edges because you can see a little bit of rust coming back. And I want to clean this up and re-undercoat it. Also, having it in this position is going to make it easier to fix stuff like this. Because now I have access to both sides, which is going to be great. I've got a couple of holes here. You can see some light through these holes. So I think I'm going to have to cut out probably that much there. Might just go like that. So we got to cut that out there. Then down here, that one's pretty big. And what we're also going to fix is stuff like this. So I might have to come in, cut down here. I'm not 100% sure yet. But I know, I already have a line marked here. How far I'll have to go up here. Similar story over here. So now I have to fix this hole, and this hole. So again, you can see why these rust out from the inside out in between all the spot welds. I dug around in my scrap bin and this is what I found. This is a leftover from when I made the strips to fit the floor. And this I'm going to cut in half and form for here. Alright, now that we've got our piece for here, we're going to have to recreate this profile on this piece. So basically I need to recreate this. So these kind of blend away into a straight line there. The way to do this is pretty easy. I'm just going to use my vise. Alright, so I've lined up the jaws to these two lines. So I'm going to transfer these marks over to the other side. Like that. So I had to get a bit creative with the vise, but I think this will work. Something like that. I've got my patches. Let's weld them in. Welded, 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 and welded. All right, I sprayed primer on a few of the patches. As soon as it dries, I'm going to seal up some of the edges with some seam sealer. And then it's time to recoat this thing. So that made a big mess as usual. But I got these edges sealed up. So as soon as it dries, it's ready for undercoat. Alright, I've got the bed sitting flat again, so let's get back to the outside. Technically, I should have done the bottom of the bed before I did anything else, but I didn't know if I'd have time this season to do that, and I could always put it off for next season. And I wanted to see how much work was actually left on these panels. So that's why I did the body work on this earlier. This is the seam that I welded up, and I wanted to get some primer into some of these little holes. So now that I've got it to this stage, I can fill this. I haven't done any filler down here. There's a couple spots that had a little bit of spillover, but generally speaking, I didn't do any filling there. I've talked a little bit about this shape being difficult to recreate, but I never really explained why. So I figured I should spend a little bit of time on that. What makes this tricky to replicate is this part curves outward, so it's convex, and then it switches direction and you get a little bit of a concave section here. This is the part that I have trouble with because it's not a defined line, but it is. You see this kind of ditch, I guess, for the lack of a better word, running down the side of the truck. And if you don't get it straight, it's going to be wavy all the way up and down the side of the truck. The other part that I struggle with a little bit is this chamfer, bevel, because this bevel was non-existent originally. Toyota just put some seam sealer in here and they called it a day. But I've taken the seam sealer out and I've welded this up, so now I have to put some kind of bevel in here that looks factory. So I'm going to sand this and see what it looks like. So as I've mentioned a couple times, when I'm sanding with a sanding block, I'm never going to sand this way or this way. I'm always going to be at some kind of angle. I also like to change position for a few reasons. One, it's just more comfortable to change positions to move around. And two, to try to get a different pattern on here so I'm not always sanding exactly in the same spots. To try to blend it out a little bit more. this panel would be a lot better than it is, but that's okay. So you can see there's a number of high spots, some of them bigger than others. These are all those little dents I talked about earlier. That's fine. I'm going to keep sanding. I probably won't be able to do much more block sanding. I'll have to rough up these low spots to give the primer something to bite into. Unfortunately, it's been longer than the recoat window, so I have to sand it before coats. So I'll move on to some other areas. Probably move on back here, maybe down here, and we'll see how that goes. A little bit of a low spot here. I'm not sure if I need to fill this or not. I might just scuff this up and hit it with another coat of primer and see what that looks like. This is kind of an interesting one. There's a crease that runs through here, so we've got a low spot on this side and a low spot on this side. I'm not sure what this is from. I think this might be from when I had to modify this cutout from a 2-wheel drive cutout to a 4-wheel drive cutout, and I bent this over. I'm not sure what I want to do here. The fender flare comes out to right about here. So this part would be pretty much hidden by the fender flare. You just have this little low spot here. I'm thinking I might leave this, put a second coat of primer on it, and see what it looks like. So in the back corner here, there's tons of little high spots, but this one's actually pretty smooth. So I think with another coat of primer, this would actually be pretty good. This bottom part, however, has a few issues. So there's one dent here and kind of here. I'm not really sure what I want to do with this. None of these rear corners look very good, so I might just leave it. But I don't know, I might pull this out a little bit. I'm worried if I put filler on here, I'm going to have to sand this whole thing and it's going to take forever. So this is one of those times where you have to decide how good of a job you want to do. I'm going to start sanding this because I know this is going to need some filler. So I want to see where I need it and how much I need. So I glued some fresh sandpaper onto this little block. Here we go. So there's a patch in here, and so I had to remake this already. So I have some filler in here, so this is kind of what I'm hoping to do all the way down. I had a little spillover, so I have a little bit of filler down here in the bottom. I didn't want to do that back then, but I was like, oh, whatever. So this is flat here, so this whole section here, like all these welds, they're all low. So I should be able to skim over the top and then fill up here, and then sand it flat to be like this. This is the target. This is what I'm looking for. All the way down. On this side of the truck and the other side. So, with any luck, this is what I can do. Alright, here's my idea. I've got this old gift card. I'm going to cut this down into the shape that I want. And I'm going to use this to spread the body filler. Will it work? Who knows? Alright, got this prepped for filler. Now I don't want to get any filler on this edge because this edge is good. So I'm going to mask it off with some tape. Easier said than done, it would seem. I want to be able to fill the bottom, potentially a little bit, but I don't want any on the bevel. Something like that. Just going to make sure it's stuck down, then just kind of fold it over so it's out of the way. I do the same thing on the back, and then put some filler on. Well, I think that worked okay. I don't think it worked great, but I think it worked okay. I'm gonna have to probably do this a couple times. Before this dries, I'm gonna take this tape off. The tape was a really good idea though, otherwise I would have had a huge mess on my hands. That would have all been on here. Well, I would call that a successful experiment. The real proof will be after this is primed. This is pretty dang good. I might have to fill a little bit more on this bevel, but I'll figure that out after I prime it. Same thing back here. This actually turned out nicer, I think, than the front. Where I ran into trouble was this patch that I welded in here. This part here was high, so I had to grind down some of the welds a little bit. This would be fine, and then it would get to this part where the weld is, and then it would be high, so I have to knock it down. Easy. Time's come to get the driver's side ready for primer as well. I did unfortunately notice something when this was standing up on end. Let me show you. I noticed some cracks in the Bondo here. That means I gotta take all this filler out and see what's going on. I think I know what caused it. See, on the front, there's a brace in here. This is pretty sturdy. This was originally a two-wheel drive bed, so I had to cut these open, and I lost a little brace. So there's a fair bit of movement in here. I had this temporarily braced as I was driving the truck around, but I lost the brace somewhere along the way. So I think just this vibrating back and forth cracked this. At least that's what I'm hoping. So along with finishing my existing Bondo work, I got to redo some of it, which sucks, but oh well. Better to notice it now than after it's painted. Time to grind this part out. As you can see, there's a couple issues here. Not sure what's going on, but we're gonna find out. Gonna use this to grind it out. Wish me luck. Okay. That was a lot thicker than I expected. I don't think it needed to be that thick. So it might have just cracked because I never got around to sanding it down. So anyways, now you can see kind of where the patch is in here. I adjusted the metalwork a little bit, so this is a little bit less than it was before. There's a low spot in here. Once I figured that out, I actually made this part a lot easier. This looks like the surface of Jupiter in here, which I thought was kind of funny. So originally when I did the driver's side, I welded up this seam and then I filled it with Bondo. Generally speaking, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to put Bondo directly to the metal. So that's what I did. Unfortunately, some moisture got in, and there was a little bit of surface rust in here, which caused some of the Bondo to bubble up a little bit. So I sandblasted it out, and I'm not going to fill this with Bondo right now. I'm going to prime over it, sort of like I did on the other side. I filled this part because there's just one piece in here. There's no seam in here. That's why the body line is Bondoed up to this point. I did the same thing here. I decided, well, if the seam on the back has rust in it, this one probably does too. So I cleaned out all the Bondo, and yeah, there's some surface rust in here, so I gotta sandblast this. Well, the time has come for another coat of primer. This corner is really good. I think this one's really good. This corner is pretty good. It is still going to need some more work because I need to get some primer in here. This corner still needs lots of work, but I'm out of time, so whatever. I'll prime it, and then I'll have to scrape some of the primer out later. Primer turned out pretty good. I had a suspicion about this, but it does look like I need to add a little bit more filler down here. So this corner is like nearly done. Same thing with this corner. This is actually looking really good. There's a couple spots in here I might need to fill, but I'm going to sand this up and then see. This corner is looking pretty good. There's a couple little voids that I gotta fill, and of course I've got to finish my work on here. But this is nicely sealed up, so I shouldn't have the same problems I had before. And then of course there's this corner. I did not finish this one, so this up here isn't quite sanded quite right. This needs some more filler. So I finally finished the filler work, so now it's time for the first official coat of primer. I know I sprayed some primer already, but this is the first official coat. I was able to get this seam looking pretty good. Surprise dent over there. I was actually able to salvage this whole corner. This took a while. There's not as much filler as it looks, but yeah, there's a lot. Another surprise dent over there. Again, got that body seam looking pretty good. This side over here, was able to get that seam. This one is weirdly smaller than all the others. It's almost like this lower bedside was welded like too far this way. I did end up filling that with filler. This is pretty good, not perfect. And back here, so you can see all the high spots and stuff. It's just gonna be what it's gonna be. And I did strip this lower part as well. I have been busy converting the rust in the floor of the bed. Wherever I have self-etching primer, there was rust that I've removed. I've dusted off the tailgate. Let's have a look at what needs to be done on here. Both of these corners have patches in here, so this will need some filler. This dent that I tried to pull out, that's going to need some filler. This tailgate has the same problem as the side of the truck. There's no inside to the tailgate. So anything falls to the back, or you're loading something up and you drop something on the tailgate, puts dents in here, but they're in this direction. So there's tons and tons and tons and tons of high spots. I knocked a bunch of them down, But once I got the filler on here, I'm going to block this out and just see where all the high spots are. This is just etch primer I sprayed on last year so that it wouldn't rust over the winter. This tailgate isn't quite ready, but I'm spraying some primer, so I'm going to spray a coat on this because it's going to need a few coats of primer. Thick coat of primer I sprayed on here definitely helped, but this thing is pretty bad. It's gonna be a miracle if I can get this to look halfway decent. I mean, I can't get this to come across on the camera, but it's just so lumpy here. It's insane. I think this is gonna get fixed with lots and lots of body filler. Lots and lots of thin coats and hammering down high spots as I go. I tapped down a few of these, but it still feels really bad, and I think it's because there's a lot of low spots too. So yeah, I'm gonna keep at it. This bottom part's actually looking not too bad. I honestly thought this would be a lot worse. I thought this would be the trouble down here, but it actually doesn't seem that bad now. To fix this dent, I put a bunch of filler on this bottom part, and I put a little bit down here. And I'm going to try to get this curve even all the way down. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to use this really long block. This of course isn't rounded, so I'm just going to use the edge. So I'm going to use the profile on each side of the dent as a guide to shape the filler down here. So I'm going to be careful that I don't go way off course with this. And just like very little pressure. Just going to go back and forth like this. And what that's going to do is it's going to basically draw a straight line from each of these points, and it's going to make this completely flat all the way across. I'm obviously going to have to add some more filler, but I figured I'd do a little bit of sanding to figure out where my highs and lows were. And I can see here I already have a little bit of a high spot. believe it or not, this thing is actually starting to look okay. And I'm going to need a little bit more filler in some spots, so I'm going to mark them. I'm going to have to deal with this whole bottom edge, but I'm going to ignore that for now. So I need a little bit more down here. So I'm just going to mark it with an arrow. So a little bit over here that I need. I'm going to need a little bit here, 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 there. So that's probably all I need for down here right now, but I'm going to need to put some over here. So there's some pretty decent low spots in here. So I think I might just put a skim coat over this whole thing. I do find it useful to mark where I want to add filler, because once you sand it, it's really hard to tell where you wanted to put filler. I'll show you what I mean. I need to add a little bit of filler here. And you can see it. It looks funny. But watch what happens when I sand it to prep it for filler. Can't really tell now, can you? So once you have a bunch of spots like that, you don't know where you have low spots anymore. So you miss them, and then you prime over them, and then you find your low spots. So I find it really helpful to just mark it. Try to keep the flag somewhat farther away, so that when you fill, you don't, underfill, because that's super annoying too. Getting close to another coat of primer on here. This is like pretty much perfect. Same with this. I've got to do something with this whole bottom edge. That'll probably be next. I filled this whole top part, kind of blocked it down and tapped some of the high spots down, and then filled over top. So these used to be high spots basically. And I did the same thing in here, which was a lot of work because it's really hard to sand in here. But I did it. I don't feel any unevenness when I run my hand over it, which is a good sign. So I'm assuming when I prime this, it'll look pretty good. There's some problems in between these letters. I'm not quite sure how I'm gonna deal with that, because I can't, obviously I can't block sand in there. So, not sure what I'm gonna do. Most of them are not too bad. There's some kind of divot in here. I don't know what's going on here, but I've got like a ledge. So I might, I don't know, fill a little bit more here. Even if I don't get this perfectly even, you're not really going to be able to see if this is the same level as this, so I don't know that I really care. But anyway, this is actually looking promising. This thing is finally ready for a coat of primer. This took some doing, but this is pretty much good. This is pretty much good. And this is pretty much good. I also fixed this bottom edge, so It looks nice and straight. Should look good once it's painted, I hope anyway. There's a few bits and pieces that need to be painted as well. Besides the tailgate, we have a set of four-wheel drive fender flares. We have the tailgate handles. These are the original handles that came on the bed. These are a set that I picked up at a wrecker off of a tailgate that was actually nicer than the tailgate I have, but some monster had cut holes in it, which made me very sad, but at least I was able to get these. Annoyingly, these were already yellow and so I painted them blue. And last but not least, we have the original fuel door. The fender flares are okay. This one is in pretty good shape. This one goes on the passenger side. Somebody cracked it. There's a little crack there. And they had it attached with like a wood screw or something. So I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to fix that. I don't know if I can use body filler on this because this is fairly flexible. I also won't be able to use my regular primer. I did pick up some special plastic primer, which is somewhere. I'm going to see if this will work as primer. This pin or the hole is wallowed out. There's quite a bit of play back and forth in here. It means that this doesn't keep the tailgate tight on the one side. I had originally fixed it by just putting a little piece of metal around here. It helped, but this one's junk. The other one is actually pretty decent. It's pretty tight. This isn't deformed. It's going to be annoying to get all this black paint off, but this is a definite contender. This one is pretty tight, but it's been bent. One of these was bent when I got it. I think it was this one. So it's a little bit wobbly that way compared to this one, which is pretty tight. So I don't think it's this one. This one is a little bit loose that way, but it's pretty tight this way. So we'll probably end up using these two. I thought about taking these apart, but they don't really look like they come apart. So this wire ring or whatever is welded all the way around, so I can't really take it apart per se. So I'm not sure how I'm gonna paint this, but my guess is I might have to paint this twice to get paint all the way in here. Yeah, that'll be interesting. So I got most of the paint off of these. I did notice something interesting. So this is the original one. This is off of the 79 box. It doesn't look like it was zinc plated. This one, which was quite a bit newer, I think this was off of an 82 or an 83, was zinc plated. And yet this one has rust all over it. Whereas this one is like pretty much mint, which I thought was very interesting.
This is the fender flare with the crack. So you can see it there. It kind of looks like there might be more than one. So I'm going to strip some of this paint off and have a look. Also, I thought one of these was cracked. You can see the crack on the backside here. It's pretty big, and it does look like there's a second one. So I'm going to strip this off and see what I got underneath.
That was fun. I don't know who painted this thing yellow, but it seemed like they just dumped a whole gallon of paint on top of it. So, it looks like there were some other cracks here, but it looks like they were fixed ones. So there's actually, I found 3 cracks. So there's one here, there, and there's 2 here. So that one's pretty big. It goes all the way to that part. The other one looks like it's just under the paint. And there's that one. So to fix this, I picked up this. It's got some epoxy in here that's supposed to say somewhat flexible. So I think that might be good for filling some of these scratches and dents and cracks. I've never used it before, so we'll see how that goes. Got this area cleaned up a little bit so you can see what we're working with. Kind of seems like this might have been repaired once before, because this feels a bit low. So I think I'll probably skim over this whole area. Same with this spot. So the instructions say make sure this is really clean and to kind of sand a little bit of a groove in. There's 2 types of adhesive in there. There's like an instant adhesive and then there's an epoxy. So they say to put the instant adhesive in first and then put the epoxy on after. I think I'm going to Dremel in a little bit of a groove on these. Same thing with this hole. And I'm probably going to clean out these spots and fill those with epoxy while I'm at it. So the instructions say to brush in this little activator into the crack first. Then apply the instant adhesive to one side and press it together. I don't have any brushes, so I'm going to try to use a Q-tip. I'm not sure how important this step actually is because the crack I'm working on is pretty small. But we will follow the directions. Tip full, and we'll just kind of try to get some in there. Oops. All right. Now for this part. Just hold that. that worked. So now we'll do this little crack here. Cool. Cleaned up some of the excess instant adhesive. Now we're ready for the epoxy. So there's 2 parts. I'm gonna guess at how much I need. Let's try that much. There we go. Mix it up. I'm going to try to put like way too much and then sand it. That's probably a good move. So you want to fill that, that, and that, as well as this. Kind of forgot about the screw hole. So I might need to mix some more. Looking pretty good. I think I might need a little bit more. Not bad. Hopefully this stuff sands up okay. And I don't regret putting so much of it on. Anyways, we'll check back on this later. These repaired sections are looking pretty good. I'm going to sand these and hopefully I don't have any low spots. And I'm going to have to strip the other fender flare. This one doesn't have as much paint on it as the other one. This still has the original color. I've just put a quick coat of black paint on it a couple years ago. That should be easy to sand off. But if you look at it, the finish is all cracked. So I'm going to have to sand it off and get down to a part where it's not cracked. You can see on the other flare, I had the same problem. So some of this has to get sanded a little bit more, but the majority of the sanding is done. I could skip this step, but odds are my new paint would crack as well, and I don't really want that, so we'll sand it up. I'm going to sand the back of this a little bit just to get an idea for how the epoxy sands, because if I don't get the back perfect, it's not a big deal. I don't have to sand a lot of this. So I'm going to try 80 grit on this and see how that works out. Seems to sand okay. I don't want to sand all of it off. The more of it I leave on, the stronger it will be. I just want to remove some so it doesn't rub. Yeah, actually it sands up pretty nice. This repair turned out really good, I think. Unfortunately, there's a couple low spots in the filler. The unfortunate part is this filler isn't Bondo and takes 2 hours to cure. That means I have to wait 2 hours before I can sand it and prime it. That sucks. But, oh well. We'll fix it right. We'll do it right.
think this is good enough. It looks like this has been resprayed. I don't know, these layers don't make much sense to me. But I've sanded all the cracks out, and I sanded these pits out. I think this is the substrate, so I don't want to go any further. This is ready for a coat of primer. So as soon as the other fender is dry, we can spray some primer. I'm going to go wash this crap off. This seems dry enough to sand, so let's give it a go, eh? Yeah. All right. It's done.
That's enough for this episode. Tune in next time when I do the finished priming and sanding.